So joining us this evening for the Pledge of Allegiance, we are excited to welcome Kason Leisure from Barber CLC. Kason is a proud member of the Barber CLC student body. She enjoys reading, science, mysteries, and cookbooks. She is an enthusiastic fourth grader who enjoys helping others and is a wonderful office helper. She comes to school early to help the secretary with assisting and welcoming new students, showing substitute teachers to their classrooms, and attending to other tasks without being asked. She is always respectful to students and staff and is willing to go the extra mile when it comes to showing students the Barber CLC way. Kason's long-term goal is to be a nurse. She will be applying to the STEM school to work toward achieving her dream. With her excellent grades and attitude, she will certainly be an APS success story. Let's welcome Kason.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mom? Hardly your mom's over there. Yeah, so tell us who you brought with us.
I brought my mom, my baby cousin, Sire. I brought my auntie, and I brought my grandma. And I also my office worker, Miss Anderson. And I also brought my principal and her daughter, Mrs. Williams.
Well, thank you very much for coming and supporting her as well. And you guys are more than welcome to stay and enjoy the show, or if Kason has work to do, you're free to leave as well. All right. With that, we are going to continue on with community and school reflections. So I will open it up to anyone that would like to share.
I just want to share, this has been an exciting time for us as we met on the 15th with representatives from our college and career, preparing for our big announcement on the 16th. And of course on the 16th having that designation ceremony, which was, I think, excellent. Whoever planned that, and we saw the wonderful diversity, not only with the students, but the staff, the community participants. Those are the things that we need, network attention, where someone would have been there and had taken, put that on the TV news, to see what a diverse community we represent and how talented our students are. The young lady who sang the national anthem was just outstanding. Beautiful voice. I think she was from Ellet or East Ellet, or one of those two. Early College, Akron Early College. So we wanted to just thank them for that, for their outstanding work, and of course for our designation as the first school in Ohio to be a part of the academy. So we want to thank our staff, of course our visionary superintendent, but we want to thank the staff, but also the board members. I think every board member almost has had an opportunity to go to Nashville to actually see for themselves, to get a hands-on accounting of what was going on and how that would fit us, and how we can be successful. I believe in today's Beacon Journal, there was an article also highlighting that. So we want to thank the Beacon Journal for their support as well. And then the Teacher of the Year banquet, again, a very exciting time to get to see our teachers and them being honored. And for Mr. Black, I'm sorry, I believe the secondary school was given the award this year, and we know your staff and teachers, administrators work hard, but they had the representative from King did an excellent job in representing those in that arena. So we're grateful that a new string is beginning. So we're grateful for that. So we thank our wonderful teachers and staff for the wonderful work that they do. And again, the diversity. Students who recognize teachers, and you saw again that diversity that we have in Akron Public Schools. So we again thank everyone who made that event possible, Carla Sibley and the staff and everyone who worked so very hard to make sure we honor those who honor is due.
Karen Gigic as well. She was very instrumental.
Yes, thank you.
Yes, yes.
Karen Gigic. And other staff persons, thank you, folks. Thank you.
Who's next? Well, I'm going to say a couple things too. The Ford NGL reception that they had the day before we had the ceremony was nice. It was the stakeholders were there and had a nice, quiet, relaxing atmosphere that you can talk and get to know who they are and see what's going on. But to me, the highlight of that evening was Elliot's jazz band. The kids played excellent. They were really well, and we need to get them somewhere on stage, a big stage, because they did really well there. So that was a nice event there to kick off the ceremony that we had on Tuesday. Also, the teacher year, again, I want to thank teachers, all the teachers, because they do a really good job. And not just all the teachers, I want to say the principals and administrators as well, because I talked to several and they said, well, once a teacher, always a teacher, so we have to thank all of them because they all are teachers. So thank them for what they're doing and what they have done to help our kids and get our kids through the school years that they've been here, and all the hard work that they do, because if it wasn't for teachers, none of us would probably be where we're at today. So I wanted to thank them. And then I also attended a George C. Miller Scholarship Luncheon, and George C. Miller was the first African-American principal in the city of Akron. I don't know what year that was, I don't remember, but he was very good. I remember him as a kid, and he was a model administrator. But there were, at the banquet, there were 9 recipients who got scholarships that day, and 4 of them were from Akron Public Schools. So I wanted to thank them for their hard work and them getting their scholarships, and congratulations to them, because they were really, really good. And as Reverend Walker said at the Teacher Year Banquet as well, those students who selected one of their teachers and said that person has an impact in their lives and helped them, I want to thank them and those teachers as well, because they're very, very important. And when you have an impact or make a positive impact on young people, it sticks with them. So thank you. Thank you, Mr. Bravo.
And I'll just chime in. In addition to all those, and they were all fabulous events. It was a fun week because everything was very uplifting and positive and exciting. I started out on the 9th with the Garfield and East Orchestra Extravaganza, and they were great. I mean, it was just a great combination between the middle schools and the high school, and the kids performed fabulously. And then the next night, the Akron Early College, they had their legacy class dinner. So there was a dinner beforehand with the kids that graduated 10 years ago, coming back to see how successful they'd been, and they were having a great time seeing each other and enjoying it, and then followed by graduation, which was fabulous, as always. They did a great job on that. And then on the 16th, after the fabulous Ford NGL ceremony, there was also the 90th annual May Festival, which was great. They had everybody singing. It was a lot of fun, and the kids did a great job on that. So, and then the next night was the STEM graduation. So I got to go to the university twice for 2 different graduations, and
And David did very well. His daughter was graduating that night, and he was excellent. He had a great speech, and he was wonderful. So I just want to say, it was just a fun week all around, or 2 weeks. It was great. Everything was going on.
Hi. I just want to throw a few extra things into some of the things that have already been mentioned. Some of the highlights, not to contradict Mr. Alexander, because the Ella Jazz Band was fantastic, but the highlight of my evening was the superintendent singing. I would pay money if there's a recording somewhere that should be on YouTube, but that was fantastic. If we knew that all we had to do was bring Ford to town for him to get a microphone and sing, we'd have done it a long time ago, right? Because that was absolutely amazing. That is followed only in my week with the superintendent with the dad he got for giving his daughter a hug at graduation. So you had a bit of a rough time with that one, but you did a wonderful job with your speech.
Yeah, at least I didn't cry.
You did not. So you did a fantastic job. And then just to add more comedy to the wonderful things that Miss Walsh added, the May Festival, my highlight of that, in addition to just the fantastic hard work that goes into that. Could we have made our staff work any harder last week? My gosh. The highlight for me of that was all of the entire audience, all of the students, including Dr. McWilliams-Woods, Ms. Walsh and I all doing YMCA. You've not lived until you've seen that in House of the Lord with hundreds of people. That was just an amazing experience. So thanks to everyone who worked so hard to make that so special. On a more serious note, I did get invited, and I've told them, if you invite us, we will come. So there was a STEM presentation by a freshman, Grace Costco, who I was invited not knowing she was a freshman. She has mastered the skills necessary for her to pass her history requirement for the year. So in lieu of taking a history class, she was able to do kind of an independent study on women's history. And she gave a presentation that would knock your socks off. She was fantastic, had a few technical things go wrong, improv'd her way through it, really did a great job. I seriously went up to her asking, Grace, where are you going to school next year? Thinking she was a senior and she's a freshman at STEM. So just if you get a chance to attend one of those ending presentations, try to move heaven and earth to get to one because they are fantastic. Got to attend the Firestone Choir concert, and then the highlight of my weekend was we had several students from the district, from Firestone, who were actually nominated for the Dazzle Awards at Playhouse Square this weekend. And we had 2 students competing in the Best Actress category. And with the winning of that you get $1,000 for your winnings and the chance to compete on a Broadway stage in June. And for the second year in a row, and this is only the second annual Dazzle Awards, a Firestone student is going to Broadway and will perform on June 26th. Her name is Raina Moran, and she will be performing. So she is going to be eligible for a $10,000 scholarship if she should win that. And she's a lovely person and represented the district very well, and will do so in New York as well.
Just wanted to add something that I think a lot of people missed, but this past week, Mrs. Jean Ott, Conrad Ott's, former Superintendent Conrad Ott, former school board member Conrad Ott's widow, had a program at their house regarding the beehives that Mr. Ott had, or I should say still has. Those hives, for the first 7 years, Mr. Ott was the beekeeper of his own hives. Over the past 7 or 8 years, they've had student volunteers, some former elementary school students who actually went to programs there and throughout high school became the beekeepers of the hives on the Ott's property. The program and celebration was sort of celebrating the end of an era of those beehives on the Ott's property and celebrating the move to the Akron Zoo, where they will be for hopefully, as long as the Akron Zoo's there, for not just certain schools to benefit. In the past, there was one elementary Akron Public School Elementary and a parochial elementary that had programs there every year. Hopefully, with the move to the Akron Public Zoo, that will be expanded to everybody in Summit County and beyond, for that matter. So Mr. Ott's bees and his hives will live on. And in this day and age where there's a lot of concern over the bee population and what's happening to the bee population, it's fitting it goes to the zoo so they can continue to teach what Mr. Ott started about 14 or 15 years ago.
I personally will be returning my zoo pass. I don't like bees.
I have one more thing. I've missed it. I should have never missed this. On a sad note also, last week I went over to Helen Arno, or this week last week over to Helen Arno Elementary School, where Principal Davis and the students, and especially the kindergarten or the younger students, let off balloons for their classmate who was perished in the fire a week before last. It was touching to see the kids be there for her and to send the balloons off and say they love her, and it was very touching. And the families were there, both the families, the Higgins and the Boggs, were there. So can we please keep them in prayer? Because there's a young lady, Brittany, is the only one that's remaining and not have her parents or her siblings, and so we need to pray for her along the way. So please keep them in our prayers. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, with that, I'm gonna leave that there. And we have one request to address the board, but we will address that in executive session. So at this point, we're going to go to communications and recognitions and start with the Auditor of State Award. So I'll turn that over to Mr. Pendleton and Mr. Miller.
And Lindsay Blair, I think, would like to approach the board.
Do you want me to go behind the podium, or can I just stand?
Whatever's comfortable.
Is this okay? Well, I'm pleased to be here this evening. My name is Lindsay Blair, and I am from the State Auditor's Office, Auditor Dave Yost. And it was really important for me to come out this evening on several accounts to give you some backstory. This isn't a shakedown, by the way. We audit about 5,900 local entities, whether it's school districts or municipalities, et cetera. But very few entities actually qualify to receive the award, the AOS award. So with that being said, I am going to just read a snippet of this juicy letter from the state auditor so you can understand a little bit of what the award encompasses. But essentially this means that the school district received a clean audit, that there were no findings for recovery, material citations, material weaknesses, significant deficiencies, any questionable costs. And what that really means, I think a lot of folks don't really understand what's involved in maybe the audit process. It's not just about crunching the numbers every day, it's a lot more about compliance. And again, that's another reason why I wanted to come out and honor your treasurer this evening, because although we recognize it is a collaborative effort, from the moment that I met Mr. Pendleton, I could just feel that he's oozing with leadership and had quite a bit of expertise and charisma. I don't know why they're laughing, I'm being serious. But truly it's an honor. I know that you were saying earlier that you would like to highlight your educators, and I think it's really important to have leadership in your administration that is excited to come and crunch the numbers and provide audit information. And we thank you all for your hard work every day, and we appreciate you being an excellent steward of taxpayer dollars.
But we're going to ask them to come forward.
Okay.
They're much more fitting to receive this award, one, based on their service to Akron Public Schools and how long they've been, but the support that they provide you and the rest of the district, especially as all of you know, we're settling contracts right now, they're paying retro pays and doing all the behind the scenes transactions. So real quick, I just wanted to highlight them. We've got Blaine here, if you can raise your hand. He's got 30 years of experience. Chris Kaiser, 5 years in the district. Kathy Kellum's brand new to us, but 2 years. You're going on your second year.
Third year of the district.
Yeah, so 2 years with us.
1 year with you.
Karen Nicolino, 16 years. Gloria, 19. Helen, 32 years. Wayne Bowers has been here 1 year. Marcia, 13 years. Katie, 2 years with us. Ruth, 15 years. Todd, 15. Kathy Franklin, 19. Denise Hull, 17. Valerie, 4. And Lisa, last but not least, 26 years. These folks don't only process your checks and accounts payable, but they've adopted buildings and classrooms. They read to kids. They get out in the buildings as often as we can. So I want to extend my greatest appreciation for you guys, and I know they do too. So, thank you.
And on behalf of the board, I want to thank Ryan and his staff. I mean, this is a really excellent honor for us. It's kind of another cherry on the top of what's been several good weeks for Akron Public Schools and all of the work that you all do. And I don't think that, you know, for people that don't realize, being the 5th largest district in the state of Ohio, having an annual budget of nearly $700 billion, it isn't just about crunching the numbers. It really is about making the numbers work for the kids, finding a way to do as much as we can with as little as we have, and that sounds like a lot of money, but when you talk about a district that's 21,000 students and all of the programs and services and buildings and opportunities and options that we have, it surprisingly doesn't go as far as it probably should. So on behalf of the board, thank you very much for all that you do and all the hard work that you put in. And I also believe that we have some words from So I want to read this too on behalf of Pat Scheit, President of the Education Association. She would like to recognize the dedication and outstanding work which the finance department staff exhibits on an ongoing basis. Your commitment to the work is greatly appreciated.
Great. One more. I think that one's fitting also.
Yeah, so, sorry. And Representative Amelia Strong-Sykes also wanted to congratulate the district for this excellent achievement, for demonstrating fiscal responsibility and transparency, which is crucial in providing excellent education for our students. Congratulations to the Finance Department for again receiving the Auditor of State Award, and that's from State Representative Amelia Strong-Sykes.
Thanks, everybody. See you guys tomorrow. 7:30.
All right. And in the spirit of good things happening at Akron Public Schools, I want to welcome and invite Mr. Eric Fletcher from The Ohio State University for recognition of some Young Scholars graduates. Mr. Fletcher. I also forgot I was going to point you out to Marilyn. There she is.
Well, peace and blessings to everyone. Like Mr. Brown said, my name is Eric Fletcher. I'm Program Coordinator of the Young Scholars Program, representative of the Ohio State University Office of Diversity and Inclusion. Today I brought my supervisor, Dr. Rochelle Woods, up from Columbus, and we're going to recognize our senior scholars that go to the high schools here in Akron Public Schools that are graduating and headed on down to Ohio State. Dr. Woods.
Thank you. So first, I just actually want to acknowledge Mr. Fletcher. So Mr. Fletcher just started in September in Akron, but he actually was the program coordinator for Cleveland, and as soon as this position came open in Akron, he immediately said, I have to go back because this is his hometown. So he is a graduate of Brookfield High School. He grew up here his entire life, and he, of course, later went on to graduate from The Ohio State University. He is a young scholar, and he is a master's from Central Michigan University. So he was very excited. So this is the end of his first year here, so I just wanted to acknowledge him. We're very grateful to have him here. So the Young Scholars Program, for those of you who don't know, it's really an opportunity for academically talented students who are from first-generation households that are also low income to have an opportunity to first understand how to go to college. So we work with our pre-college students on all the aspects of learning what you need to do to be ready for college. We also make sure they're taking a college prep curriculum, so we work with counselors and teachers as well to make sure that these students are on track. And then when they come to The Ohio State University, we really surround them with services to make sure that they graduate. And I'm sure you all know the statistics, but nationally, the graduation rate for students that are both first-gen and low income is only 11%. And the numbers that are actually going into higher ed are not that poor, but they're not the best. And so we're really trying to provide these students who are really very talented and really ready for higher education the opportunity to go with the scholarship. And so we've been able to expand our program. So we recently just added 15 new students in Akron in grades 8 through 10. And we just added 220 new students statewide. We're in 9 cities: Akron, Canton, Cleveland, Cincinnati,
Columbus, Dayton, Youngstown, Lorraine, Toledo.
Okay, so we're in 9 cities. And so we just added a lot of students statewide as well. And currently with us are 4 students, but there's actually 6 that are graduating, so I just want to acknowledge them. The first student is Nazir Harris. If you could just stand when I call your name. Nazir is graduating from Brookfield High School. She enjoys reading, writing, singing, dancing, and learning new things. She also likes to explore different aspects of the world. She is in the top 10 of her class at Brookfield. I always say the name of the school wrong. Brookfield. Her career goals include, of course, going to The Ohio State University. She aspires to be a social worker or therapist. And she really just wants to make a difference in people's lives. Thank you. Keep standing. Damiana Merriweather. Her mom is here. She is actually not with us. She will be with us today, but that is her mom.
And it's by default, her plane had to get rescheduled, so she coming late.
So Damiana is actually the president of the senior class at Akron Early College. She is ranked number 4 in her class and was a valedictorian. She is receiving an honors diploma with a gold seal, and she also received her Associate of Science from the University of Akron. She is a member of the National Honor Society and an advisor leader for sophomores. She also tutors and mentors with the Ladies First Basketball Association. And she plans to major in psychology with a minor in criminal justice on a pre-med track. And she was also accepted into one of our honors programs on campus. Destiny Roberts. Destiny is graduating from Akron Early College with an honors diploma and an Associate of Science degree from University of Akron with high distinction. She is a valedictorian and a member of the National Honor Society, and she also received a Gold Seal certificate. She received a National Student Athlete Award from the Army Reserve, the Presidential Award of Excellence, and the Presidential Award of Excellence. She has also participated in and served as captain of the track and volleyball teams at Brookfield High School, where she was also awarded First Team All-City and WAKR Student Athlete of the Week. At Ohio State, she plans to major in health sciences with a minor in neuroscience, with plans to go to medical school and become a general surgeon. Mariah Roper. Mariah is graduating from Akron Early College. She enjoys baking, spending time with her son, and volunteering at Bath Manor Special Care Center, which is a nursing home. She hopes to either become a medical doctor and specializing in being a pediatrician. And then we have 2 students who are not here that I also want to acknowledge. One is Erica Tinsley, who's also graduating from Akron Early College and who's planning to major in business with a specialty in accounting. and Tariq Vinson from STEM High School, who has an undecided major. So. These scholars have been awarded an average of $15,500 per person for 4 years. So that's about $93,000 in 1 year, and over the time that they're at OSU will be approximately $400,000 of scholarships.
Good job.
Yeah.
Scholars come up.
Pictures of.
Thank you, Superintendent. For having us.
While they're getting up there, I also want to say something about Mr. Fletcher. Mr. Fletcher, when he was attending Bookto, I was over at Bookto at that time working, and he wasn't just a good student in college, but he was a good student then, and when he went to school and he came back, and he also has been part of the young black professionals around here in the Akron area, been involved with kids and young people for a while, so I want to make sure that he got a shout out because he's doing a lot of good things, and he's always involved with doing projects for our kids at Akron Public Schools. Thank you.
We have room.
That's all I have. So thank you for having us.
Hold on, one more.
Okay, all right.
Thank you so much.
All right. Again, so many good things happening at Akron Public Schools, and just a quick note too. And I think Mr. Alexander and I are on the same page today. He keeps saying everything I was going to say. But Eric has, through the Young Black Professionals Coalition, has also done several back-to-school backpack days and organized free haircuts for kids, and so has done a lot for the kids in our schools. So I hope that maybe at some point we can have him back to talk about things that they're doing through his organization there as well. And with that, we are going to a presentation on family and community engagement.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening.
Did I mention that Eric was my cousin? Thank you for the time this evening. To give just a brief update, it will be brief. There's much more to share, but I'd be happy to speak with you offline if you have questions and desire more information. So we land in the focus area 3 around public engagement, focused intentional connections with parents and maximizing our partnerships, but we also touch on focus area 2 around learning conditions. I wanted to share with you that we are research-based in our approach for engaging our families, and you have at your locations this hyperlink of the dual capacity framework developed by Dr. Mapp with the Harvard Family Research Project in the Harvard School of Education. And it is not coming up, here it is. Wanted to just share briefly, and you can read all the other articles associated with this presentation, this particular graphic for your bedtime reading, but wanted to share with you that this particular framework addressing school-family partnerships has been adopted by the United States Department of Education and now our Ohio Department of Education. And we are right now taking part in discussions with ODE and the other urban 8 districts to address how our ESSA policy will roll out this particular framework. So I'm happy to say that we actually went down this road to adopt this as our research-based model 2 years ago in our district, and very much like other departments and under the leadership of our superintendent and his vision, we always tend to be ahead of the game. So I'm happy to report that it remains that way even in this particular area. And as it relates to what is most important for us to remember around this framework is that we look to ensure that everything we do at the building and the district level have some, one, or all of these 5 process conditions. Everything we do around engaging our families, we are looking to ensure is linked to learning, based on developing and nurturing and creating relationships with families. Developmental versus service orientation, meaning not just giving things away, but ensuring that we are somehow tying everything back to what our families need to know to support learning. We want to be collaborative and interactive. We also seek principal input in terms of how they wish to work in their buildings at the building level in terms of the family programs that they have. And they have all said, and I think I shared this last spring, strengthening family knowledge to support learning, improving communications between home and school, and then connecting our families to resources that support their well-being. We also use the telephone survey information that I shared back in the fall in terms of those topics and those things we need to be considering when we're working with families around safety and bullying, communication, addressing the transportation issue. When we host programs, we provide transportation. We know it is a barrier for many of our families in terms of connecting with the school, and we want to remove that. And then the small group and individualized instruction. We are right now working with Deborah Folk in the Business Affairs Office and our Transportation Department on a survey that will go out to all of those non-APS families using our APS transportation services so that we can continue to get the feedback from those families that we don't necessarily get to see every day, day in and day out. There are 17 family liaisons wrapping up this school year. 15 of them are funded by our school improvement office, Mr. Kenya Harrington helping with that, and 2 are out of our English language learning office with Dr. Nguyen because we know we have the language barrier. Our 2 liaisons in Findlay and North High School speak multiple languages so that they can translate the programs and activities and materials and information we want to share with our families. One of the things that we do, and I think I passed out a hard copy of this program approach, is to address not just the academic, but the physical, the social well-being, and the emotional well-being of our families so that our approach to those things we do is holistic and not academic alone, whole child. Some of the program activities that have taken place in our buildings this year, book talks around parenting, looking at the way our students learn, where speakers with content expertise came in to speak with our families about those various topics. This Wednesday, we will be at the Ohio Means Job Center from 5:30 to 7 with a Career Exploration Opportunities Awards for students who attended a program throughout this year from Jennings and East, and then providing the resources and informations around careers for families as well. Wanted to just show you the extent of the kinds of family cafes that our staff held in schools this year. You can see on the far left the kinds of themes for those sessions held in our buildings this year. And everything from home access center to literacy, summer program information, healthcare related things, financial goal setting, team building, tuning up for the semester, answering volunteer questions. So thanks to May Walker, we do a really good job of ensuring that our liaisons are meeting the needs of the families in the schools that they serve, and ensuring that those topics are intentional and responsive to the things that they have said they would like to learn more about. To date, our family liaisons, those 17, have made 3,718 contacts with families, all around various things, mostly attendance, grades, behavior, and all resulting in referrals to resources, whether those are in the school or connection to community resources. But they're doing the work to build those relationships with families. And oftentimes, an attendance isn't just an absence. An absent issue isn't just a student missing school. Sometimes there's a need for healthcare referral. Sometimes there's a fire in a family. Sometimes there is a death and there's a need to connection to grief counseling. So they're doing the work to build those relationships to get at the why behind an absence or behavior or whatever else might come up for those families. Here recently, we've been working with Andrew Zaccardi out of the Student Services School Climate Office and Yvonne Culver in our School Counselors Division to identify those buildings that have what we're calling the Family Support Team. We have some of our schools, about 8 to 10 of them I think now, have a school counselor, a school climate person, and a family liaison. So our goal is that each of these three would address a particular issue utilizing their own area of expertise. So if an issue related to bullying comes up in a school, the school counselor might address that with individual counseling and classroom guidance. The school climate person might address it by looking at hot spots in the building. Where are those incidences taking place in the school? How do we address resources that take kids in a different direction? While the family liaison may be working with that family to teach some behavior management skills, to link to counselors that we have, mental health, pastoral, minority behavior health, child guidance, therapists in our schools. So we want to be more focused about how we use these resources in our buildings. And in that dual capacity framework that I share, this is where we want to be. We want to honor and recognize our families' funds of knowledge. We want to connect them and everything that they do to student learning and have inviting, welcoming culture. So that's our role, and that's what we believe we should be doing with our family and community engagement work. And on the right side, you see we want families who have the capacity to be supporters, encouragers, monitors, advocates, decision makers, and collaborators. All nice words, but for many of our families, they need help to get there, and that's what we believe our role can be. We're also providing training. We used to call it cultural competency. I have renamed it because of the research on cultural sensitivity and humility, so that we are more respectful of the aspect of lifelong learning. To date, we've provided 165 hours of training. This school year alone, Karen Gijic and the superintendent, assistant superintendent, have worked with us to ensure that all new hires receive this training as a part of their onboarding in our district. It's been very powerful. Schools request our trainers. There are 9 of us, and we are often out on non-instructional days at buildings providing training. We've conducted 6-hour options, and now we're being asked by community partners to come out and provide training. Dr. McWilliams-Woods has done some of those mini sessions with me and others. Our superintendent is right now exploring opportunities for partnering perhaps with other entities like our ESC, because now other school districts are calling for our training teamwork. So it's pretty exciting. It gets me going in the morning. It's something I really enjoy. And the customer service piece is included as a part of that work. So we're also embedding those concepts around customer experience in that cultural sensitivity training. I wanted to share the information from the 2016 Community Needs Assessment because I think it is important that we have a broad perspective of what the needs are in our community. And I know Mr. Bravo was at the Cleveland Clinic Akron General meeting last week, but I also sit on the SUMA's Community Advisory Committee, and the 3 hospitals have commissioned this report to look at the needs of the community. We looked at it 3 years ago. The new report is now online and available for you to review. And these are the 6 major areas that have been identified as ones to address in our community. So I think it's important for us to have this lens as we look at the programs and services that we also wish to have in our schools, and the conversations we should be having with our families, and the resources we should be connecting them with. So access to affordable health care, we have medically underserved communities in our city, areas where access to health care are limited. So we already know that our young people are going to suffer from that in terms of addressing chronic conditions. The chronic diseases, the juvenile diabetes and the chemical dependency, of course we've had that discussion. Economic development and community conditions, health professions, education and research. Right on target in terms of the college and career academies we're rolling out at North High School. Elderly health care, which some of us will be needing at some point in time. And then wellness. And so you've seen me talk about some of the family academy themes we've had in the past, all geared towards this idea of physical, social, and emotional well-being. And apparently it's on target. It's a need in our community to address those behavioral health changes. We are still working with the United Way on some of their community engagement projects, in addition to what our superintendent revealed last week with the college and career academies and their role. They also conduct a number of community engagement activities that support our buildings. We identify those schools from a targeted list that's provided to us by our elementary division. There are book drives in March and August. We're delivering school supplies, and in December we're sending kids home with food over the winter break. The City of Akron Summer Reading Program is another one we piloted with Councilman Jeff Fusco last summer, and I wanted to highlight it because often you see things in the community and you may not realize that we also have our hand in it. And there are a lot of those kinds of things that are happening in our community that you don't necessarily see, but we're there. All of the volunteers who will be working at and volunteering as tutors for young people at community centers are trained by our APS literacy coaches. Rosemary Flocari and Amy Rudd conduct trainings during non-APS work hours to ensure that they have a high fidelity training protocol that they can process. We also provide the materials for that program. We use those items that our coaches have put together for us with the Akron Reads program. And this tutoring program will take place this summer throughout the Akron City recreation sites. There are 6 of them from June 12th through August 13th. You've heard me talk before about our Closing the Achievement Gap High School Environmental Enrichment Program. There is a recommendation today the superintendent will be bringing for grant funds to support this 2-week program with the Conservancy for the Cuyahoga Valley National Park. It has won a national award for reaching at-risk urban students. And we are now working with Cleveland Metropolitan School District, who will be coming on board to offer that program for their CTAG students as well. So that's my brief update for now. If there are questions, I'll welcome them. Yes, Chairman Walker.
How do we evaluate cultural sensitivity?
Good question. We are right now in partnership with Summit Education Initiative to look at those buildings who have been a part of extensive training, not your 1 and 2 hour touch-based sessions, but extensive training. We would hope to see fewer suspensions. We would hope to see opportunities to better connect with students and families in buildings. We want to see improved ratings where school climate is concerned. We would hope to see that students feel that they're supported by adults in their building. We look at that Youth View survey that's administered by Summit Education Initiative, but it is ongoing. There should not really ever be an end to cultural sensitivity training. It is lifelong learning. It is ongoing self-reflection that I think we have to engage in on a regular, ongoing basis and then be committed to that.
It becomes difficult, not that you can't achieve that with the present staff that we have, but when we look at, and I've mentioned it on several occasions, the diversity that we have in our school district, but we don't have that diversity as relates to our teaching staff. And not to say persons of different cultures can't teach, instruct, be excellent teachers, because they can. All of us, I know I have, benefited from persons, different cultures, teaching, instructing me as a youth and coming up. But we are living in a very difficult time when our students are being challenged with so many things that we weren't challenged with. And the task is real tough for those who set their sights on being an educator and not realizing all of these different things that they have to confront.
Yeah, I agree. And I also think that there is opportunity for pre-service training for future teachers at the college level who haven't had an opportunity to even understand an urban school district and the type of diversity that we have. I think that's a discussion that I'm sure our leadership will be having.
And the other is just plain customer service, treating people right. Just respecting people, just talking to people in a way that they feel that somebody's listening, is concerned, and that they're a person too, and not just, discounted because they come in with whatever issues or concerns. I think Sister Mansfield mentioned it. It's not just that this person, something has happened to them, or someone mentioned, is because they're not in school because there might be transportation issues, might be illness, might be choir. We've just had a tremendous hurt in our district.
Violence in their neighborhood.
In the neighborhoods, how does that affect, these children that celebrated lifting up balloons, but it has to touch them in other ways, and who's reaching those students and being sensitive to those concerns if they're absent or if they're not performing well, and not just cast it off and say, hey, you're being disobedient, you're not doing your best.
I think the best thing that we do in our district is to allow for those conversations to take place. We have to be able to create safe space and opportunity for folks to have difficult conversations. And I think if you had seen our training 2 years ago and observed, I know Mrs. Walsh had an opportunity a few months ago, and observed or seen one today, you'd be shocked at how rich the content is now, because we have to have discussions about building relationships with folks who are different than yourself. We have to talk about unconscious bias. We have to talk about the many cultures and ways people present themselves, not just racially, economically, religiously, their own genetic makeup. So I think the best thing we can do is to allow for the opportunity to have the conversations and to be okay with it. We have some incredible reflections and aha moments from staff that have gone through our training. Now, the challenge is to practice that each and every day with each interaction you have with another person. And we're all challenged to do that, because we all have those days when it just doesn't work well for us. But to be mindful that it's important, I think is important. I don't know, I may not have answered your question, but you can tell I have a passion for it. It's in my heart. And that's the other thing. You can train and train and train. This is hard work. I'm not speaking to the intellect necessarily. I'm talking to your heart.
Right.
And I don't know how you measure that. Yeah. Yes.
I just had one comment, kind of piggybacking on what Reverend was stating there. The statistics that we're looking at nowadays is showing that the districts that have the teachers, professional staff that mimic or look like the makeup you have in school, those schools are doing better. And I think those kids, other than just the kids from United States or the kids from Laosha or a kid from somewhere else, but they're learning and they're getting along better and they're understanding each other. And I think that's where those relationships build, and that's also what helps with school climate, because they're getting along, they're understanding each other's culture, nationalities, and backgrounds. So that is something that is important. And I hope that down the line we will continue to look at all those things and getting our staff to be able to understand that these are tools to help you better help the kids, because that's the most important thing. Like you said, we can do training and training, but it's got to be those individuals to want to learn, because it is life learning, so if they can use those tools to help the kids. Because the bottom line is the kids that we're serving for an educational institution, and that's what we need to be doing. But the other thing, I did want to thank you guys and your liaison, family liaisons, for the work that you're doing. Cause I'm sure it's doing a lot, especially for a lot of the parents who may need some help and some support. So thank you for that and the liaison. But my question was, how many schools are we serving, actually?
With liaisons, there are 17 at the elementary level, with one middle and one high school included, and 4 at the high school level. with 2 part-time staff persons each.
Okay, thank you.
Are they serving the entire district or just specific schools?
Those schools, they are school-based.
Any other questions?
Any questions about the game tonight?
No comment. Still go Cavs.
Yes.
Thank you. For consideration, regular approval of the regular meeting minutes for May 8th, 2017. Do we have a motion and a second?
So moved. Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any questions on the minutes? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Ms. Walsh?
Yes.
Mr. Alexander?
Yes.
Mr. Bravo?
Yes.
Mrs. Mansfield?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Otterman?
Yes.
Reverend Walker?
Yes.
Superintendent's recommendations.
Mr. President, I have before me for your consideration 49 personnel recommendations. These recommendations are in proper form, and I move their approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any questions on the personnel recommendations? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Mr. Alexander?
Yes, abstain from item 42.
Mr. Bravo?
Yes, abstain from item 43.
Mrs. Mansfield?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes, abstaining from item number 44, please.
Mr. Otterman?
Yes.
Reverend Walker?
Yes, and abstaining from item number 45.
Ms. Walsh?
Yes, and abstaining from number 46.
And Mr. President, I just want to note there are several staff deaths that are in personnel recommendations. One, of course, I regret to report the death of Deborah Mansegee, who was our program specialist for Project Rise. She had been with us for approximately 20 years. Also, Mr. Albert R. Hubner III, who was a custodial worker. He had been employed with the Akron Public Schools since 2002. And also, I regret to report the death of Jason M. Roma, who was a substitute teacher with Akron Public Schools since 2004.
Thank you. And before we move on to the rest of our business, we have a presentation of the 5-year forecast. Mr. Pemberton.
You said to keep it to an hour, correct?
You can try.
Okay. 5-year forecast season is upon us every May and October. And I think I'll spare you the ODE legalese in terms of why we're required to do this. But as you know, this is our primary financial planning tool. This is living, breathing document, something that we look at. I look at daily. The administrative team, executive team looks at this monthly, and the board looks at this at least 2 times a year, and in finance committee a little bit more frequently than that. Of course, our district focus to be the #1 urban in the United States. And I think our department, I think a little bit of what you've seen tonight and how we're able to share our staff here is that our mission here over this past few years has to become, we're trying to become more ingrained in the education side of the house and really not be separate and apart. We're trying to be right in line. We're trying to support that cause and maybe even take a little bit more bold stance into making recommendations on how to support the protection of new programs like college and career academies. And so you've seen this format before. We've expanded that a little bit to say we're protecting the classroom and programming. And so as we look to the future, and you all know the state of school finance around Ohio is that every school district deficit spends at some point in time. It's inevitable. Now, we're going to talk a lot about how we were able to delay some of that by the reductions in, unfortunately, some of the buildings that we have. But how how it also positively reflects in the forecast into protecting programs, and especially this college and career academies as we start to ramp that up. Equity and resource and facilities. The next chart we're going to talk about is how our capacity across the district is reflected, how many students per square footage, kind of all in one chart. You've seen that. Obviously stretching our tax dollars. On average, Akron Public Schools goes back to the voting public about every 6 years for new money. And to do that, how do we do that? We look at staffing size, we look at enrollment, and we obviously look at our footprint. This chart's been updated since the last time that we talked. And if you'll notice in the fiscal 18 to start next school year, on the gray bar, which represents the student capacity, there's been a very large move. And that large move represents the consolidation of Kenmore Garfield to reflect the closure of one high school, one middle school, and then we have an elementary school in the north cluster. But that capacity of 20,600 and so students at the time we ran the report to the gray bar, so the black bar is the students in seat, the gray bar is the student capacity that we have in terms of square footage. The yellow line is the kind of stagnant, it's the stagnant line item in terms of what represents per pupil cost, right? And there's a lot of numbers that are thrown into that, but how much revenue that we receive per student. So this is a very telling chart that there's an actively managed boarded administration and community into right-sizing our footprint for how many students we have, reducing our expenditures to protect the classroom and programs. And you'll notice that 30,503 in the 2017 gray bar to the 2018 was a pretty substantial move. And we're going to talk about that in terms of what that represents in finances. Now, I know we made fun of this graph the last time we came together, and there was virtually no change in the two. And it's going to look the same, but I'm going to ask you to focus in on that, the green and red line. So if you look at where those lines intersect, October and 26th, you saw in this fiscal year, we were predicted to deficit spend, right? And so we're making, that intersection's happening right now. We're spending more than we're bringing in. Now let's fast forward to May. I know it just happened. I know it's subtle, but it is very substantial in terms of when we start to deficit spend. So we in a sense, by reducing our footprint, and Superintendent James is going to talk through the staffing side of that equation a little bit more in a little bit. We didn't increase our revenue, obviously. That only comes with the increased state formula or additional students. But that red line is we sure curb the expenses. Now, it seems very subtle, but it's substantial. So let's look at the numbers. The top forecast represents October of 2016. So this is October, and you'll notice that this line right here is that deficit. That's what I call the balanced budget. It's either we're break even, or we're spending more than we're bringing in, or we're bringing in more revenue than we're spending, which is building the cash reserves. So in a sense, we're a break-even balanced budget for 2017 on the top, but if you notice in 2018, on that first chart, you see we're deficit spending by the tune of $3.7 million. And then on in the fifth year on the top to finish 5 years, negative $10.5 million or so. So when you talk about operating levy and how often we go, we're starting to talk about that in between 2018 and 2019. We're going to turn the page on 2018, July 1. So this is now. And to give you, I know I've said this number, but 1 month's salary is about $12 million. So it gives you an idea that albeit $15 million in fiscal 2020 seems like a lot of money. Let's put it in a perspective that sometime between 2020 and 2021, we wouldn't be able to make payroll, which is our largest single expense. So obviously we have to plan prior to that. Now the bottom represents the reduced footprint, going back to the capacity chart. Still represents a balanced budget, but you'll notice, and it's about $6.5 million in reductions to start next year. And so we're going to add some of that back into the start of next fiscal year to give us a balanced budget, and we push off the deficit spend till 2019. We finished the 5 years with about 17 million. Do we get out of the 5-year forecast according to this without talking about new operating money? No, we don't. When you start to deficit spend by $6 and $10 million, those conversations need to be taking place there. Now, one of the litmus tests that the board and board finance committee have looked at is our cash reserve policy. And the cash reserve policy says, hey folks, the conversation's really got to start when we're about 10% of our cash balance to our overall budget. So 10% of the 346 million is 34 million. And you see we're right at that cash reserve. So in a sense, we pushed it off 1 year. Now I don't want to diminish the fact that it is 1 year. It is a very large move. And I think with that, I want to turn it over to Superintendent James, talk a little bit about the staffing and how we got there.
So basically, a large portion of staff reductions are related to the closure and merging of 3 of the buildings that Mr. Pendleton discussed earlier. Overall, however, there are about 79 positions from various classifications that will be reduced, and the majority of those will be reduced by attrition. There will be some level of tutors and some interpreter positions and some teaching positions that won't be reduced by attrition. But Kathy McVeigh's office will be meeting with all of the affected employees, and we'll be reviewing options with those. And remember, between now and the start of our next school year, there's always additional retirements and people who will want to leave. Basically, 5 administrative positions. They will be deans and principals, again, as we cut down on the number of buildings. As you saw in the board recommendation number 1, we have Kim Wilson, our principal from Portage Path, is actually retiring. 43 and a half certificated positions, 30 and a half classified positions, and then even projecting the utility savings from the closure of 3 buildings. We typically send those into a lower power use mode by only using the critical lighting, using setback for heating and cooling in those buildings as they become vacant over the summer. So the total reduction in spending from this year into the next is projected to be about $6.4 million. And again, the majority of that will be coming from the positions that we're saving by consolidating buildings. And then every spring, we look at our staffing numbers that are projected to be in our buildings in the following year, and the principals are aware of some of the adjustments that the executive directors have been working with them on. When we come back in the fall, as you're aware, we also look at our numbers again. So we'll be looking at them again in the fall based on the number of students that we'll have coming through the doors. Any questions about the staffing part? All right, thank you.
Okay. I'm going to back up one chart to talk about why now, why, and go back to one of those values of protecting the classroom and programming. And so this chart, as you know from the very first forecast I did with this board, I included the 2012-13 timeframe because that's something that you've all lived before, you've gone through this process. Really, this represents that cycle all across Ohio where, unfortunately, sometimes before new money is passed, a certain level of reductions have to be made. And sometimes those are deep. A lot of times those are deep. Those affect programming. Those go to everything from middle school sports to our favorite programming or class sizes. And you'll notice that we've raised additional revenue past 2000, then we build our cash reserves, and then eventually we deficit spend. Now my next comment's not meant to take a political angle at this, but there are some out of Columbus that say that the building of the cash reserves is not essential. And in some of the budget testimony and hearing, I've been spending a lot of time down in Columbus, there's been a reference to, but you school districts have a lot of cash you're sitting on. And I don't want to really pick sides with that, but I do want to put it into the reflection that all 614 of our public institutions or public K-12s have this same cycle. It might be 3 years in a fast-growing community, or might be 10 in a slow one. Or somebody that maybe has a public utility power plant might be extended. It's all the same. That cash balance is essential to operate. What I commend the board on, and I understand it's hard to receive that it's hard to receive that positive there, but in a sense, you are protecting, by taking the active management to this, you are protecting that classroom to where you don't let the $10 million deficit stand you in the face, and you have to respond by making very significant reductions. I've always said that to reduce staff in times when you don't have money is much more difficult than when you do. And if you can do that the majority through attrition, then you know you're maintaining your footprint in terms of programming. Now, you've also seen these charts. I know you have the handouts. I won't spend a lot of time. You've got all this trend. And the bottom right-hand part of that chart, you see revenue. The average annual growth rate of our revenue, state, local, all other investments, is growing at about 1.5% a year. Shifting to our expense side, we have wrapped up almost all of our bargaining unit contracts, so those are reflected in here. The expenses of the reduced buildings and the 79 net positions and the utility savings. Our expenses grow on average over the 5 years 3.35%. Again, this board is very actively managing this, but this is every school district, so you all know that this is an unsustainable financial business model. You know that eventually that our lines cross and we spend more than we're bringing in. Now, I do want to end on a few bright notes. There are, in financial forecasting, there are some bright notes. One is the open enrollment and charter school. So you see in 2015 was a pretty substantial year for a lot of outflows. So we had charter school that grew at 11%. College Credit Plus grew at over 100% for us from 14 to 15. Now let's fast forward a little bit. We are just finishing this in 17. So this is where we're heading into next year's estimate. So community school, there's obviously a lot of conversation out of Columbus and locally about similar platforms, let's hold each other accountable, those kind of things. Whether it's that conversation, whether it's the consolidation, some legal consolidation of some community schools in this area, we've seen a reduction of 6.7% in 16 and 7.7. Those are real numbers. Those are real numbers back from the state of Ohio. So we have fewer students leaving Akron Public Schools to go to community schools. And so remember last year we talked about that we had one single data point. We have 2 data points now. We'll call the trend. Call it, right? We've got a positive trend. And I hope, for anybody who wants to poke holes in forecast, I hope I'm wrong, right? Maybe I need to dial that back. So we'll do some more research. Community College Credit Plus grew at 16% in the 15-16 school year and about 7% in the 16-17 school year. Our K-4 numbers are up. First time that I could put the data together in about 15 years. K-4 enrollment is up. It's up a little bit, but it's a stake in the ground win, right? I think it was 39 kids. We're going to be taking a deeper dive into enrollment. I just have a few charts in Finance Committee. One of the questions they asked was, let's take a deeper dive into enrollments by cluster and where students are leaving, coming in, what community schools are going. So this is the start of that data. And Finance Committee, just because it's so lengthy, we'll break it out by cluster and then we can report back to the whole board. Vouchers. This represents about 1,200 students, but you can see the growth in vouchers by year, by top 10. Community school. Top 10 growth by year over the last 5 years, and you'll notice that those data points reflect the reduced spending. I don't think you guys have this in your supplement for the 5-year forecast, so I'll send this out to you. Open enrollment out. There has been some growth recently to open enrollment out. I'm not quite sure why it's such a big jump. We want to dive into that a little bit more. I do know some of the districts that to our south have new buildings. Sometimes the state's equation in the Ohio Facilities Construction Commission does design a building for a little bit additional square footage, as we do. It was never intended to accept open enrollment students through that design, but it does. And then open enrollment in is another bright spot. From staff members to our competitive programs, I think we ought to prepare for that number to only grow. We definitely have some data to support that. All right, that's the conclusion of my report. I can take any questions, or we can move on.
Brian,
Yes.
and I know this, what I'm about to ask is not the key to all this here, but I was going to ask, how aggressively are grant writers looking for monies that would be able to try to supplement some of these? And it'll be more like a Band-Aid approach, just to try to keep some of the, maybe staff, keep some of the activities and things that will affect the students. Such as it was the ARRA, American Recovery and Investment Act that, we had some years ago. That was like a Band-Aid, and that kept us afloat for a few years, and then, now it's gone, but we got to find some other way to try to supplement. So are we really aggressively looking for various grants that could be, monies could come in to supplement some of that, to put a Band-Aid on and hope that would get better down south, or to keep juggling each year? I mean, every 2 years, if there's a grant every 2 years, there's a grant every 3 years, just to get those monies in to try to help us. It's not going to fix everything, but I'm just kind of looking at a Band-Aid approach just to help.
From what I've seen, our staff's very active at providing supplements to our core programs. I had a meeting this week with Peggy Greiner, and by far, in a way, she's replaced her salary probably tenfold with supporting, and I think she's very well and good embedded into the district to find out where those needs are. It's not an answer to your question exactly, but on the other side of that equation is the cost control.
Right.
So at the cost control side, very actively manage that. And I think where the grants come into play, and I think we have a new vendor that's taken a really active role with us now too, Grants Plus, just to correct the new vendor, is to supplement and/or test those new areas that we couldn't fund otherwise. And so this district's relationship with not only its vendors, but its community is really strong. So when I hear somebody talk about like a senior staff for a new program, there's money that follows. I'm very impressed with that. One thing that I would like to do through Finance Committee, ultimately for Mr. Miller and Reverend Walker, is to provide them the amount of funds that we receive above and beyond, so like local grants, and then related into millage, because it is that substantial. So I think we can do that. So like local grants, everything from scholarships, but local grants, or the most recent announcement of Kent State and participating, and how that makes it more affordable. So.
Yeah, it was just something I'm always thinking about, because I've seen it happen some places, and they just kind of plug along into hopefully get a break.
Yeah.
You know, but like you said, still reducing our staff costs and that, but trying to, you know, also bring more monies in other ways to try to help that. Thank you.
Question. This spring here with the open enrollment in. I'm thinking back to what we were reading in the media in the last year about Coventry and how the open enrollment in hurt that.
Right.
Now, if I'm looking at the charts right, our cost per pupil is about 14 grand. Is that
just a little bit less, correct?
Okay. What we get in. Now, when a student comes in from outside, we're only getting $5,000. Is that correct?
That's about right. It's about $4,800.
Okay.
Exactly.
And I'm assuming that, you know, your office is monitoring where, at what point in time, that open enrollment hurts us in the same manner it hurt Coventry.
Exactly.
And I guess I've always wondered, and I guess I'll wonder out loud for everybody here, you know, if we didn't allow students to come into Akron Public Schools in an open enrollment standpoint, I wonder if when students leave Akron Public Schools, do some leave because spaces in STEM are taken by kids from outside, spaces at Miller are taken from kids from outside, and if those seats were held for Akron Public School students, we'd net an additional 10 grand per student. I don't know if you've ever looked at that or done exit surveys and, you know, asked parents, you know, would you have stayed in if your kid could have gotten to Miller or into STEM or one of our other programs?
That's the raw data that we haven't been able to put it in a display that's easy to follow along, that we want to study in Finance Committee. But we absolutely have to manage that open enrollment policy. Says you do not want to have an Akron Public School student displaced because of that. We also don't want to hire staff. We don't want to hire additional staff because of open enrollment. That would affect our spending expense to revenue side of the equation twofold. Yeah, good question.
And that being said, though, there are some times when we're out in the community where people do not really understand what an open enrollment means. We can't make people stay here. I mean, we could close our borders to let people in. I know that was a big conversation when we were in the south side of town and we were talking in Kenmore and Garfield. Well, you should just stop open enrollment. We can stop people from coming in. We can't stop them from going out. So just saying that out loud, because that is often a conversation that people misunderstand what that means.
Well, my computer froze, so
I have a
presentation's done.
I'm going to ask you three at the same time,
Can I write them down?
but they're you're probably better.
Okay.
So in your financial forecast too, you showed that real property valuation was showing estimated to be a decline. But the fiscal office is getting ready to do their triennial reappraisal next year. So do you have any comment on that, or is there a chance that, you know, we might get lucky and maybe there's one more place where you'll be wrong or off by a little bit?
Sure.
And we'll be able to celebrate both. Are you hearing anything new since the state budget is with the Senate? Are we getting any word on that? And then the casino revenue in your finance forecast too, you have that at $50.85 a student and about $1,044,000. How far off is that from what we thought it was going to be when we when the voters approved casinos.
Right, I'll answer in reverse.
Okay.
That's how much I can remember. The closest. The casino revenue is in law $50 or $55 per student. That's a little bit different than the lottery. The lottery was, the additional revenue raised was a reduction in the ed finance budget.
Right, but are we getting everything that we were supposed to have gotten, or are the numbers, are the casino revenues coming in at what they thought they would?
Originally, yes, they exceeded estimates like the very first year, and then they trailed for the last 2 years, a little bit. It's not a super big pot of money for us, but it is in law, and it's something that we do count on. Second question was state aid in terms of school formula. So we've been through the House, it's now sitting in Senate, and soon and likely to go to conference committee. From those of us who attended the OSBA legislative day to now, other than throwing a little bit more money at the student per aid dollars, we're basically a flat fund through the biennium. The state announced that they're $600 million short on their estimates, and all indications from the governor is that he wants to follow through on the income tax cuts, which is going to make it even more difficult for future school budgets. And then your first question was about property values. I sent out an email here recently as it relates to the city legislation in terms of Community Reinvestment Act and economic stimulus. So it's a relevant topic, an important one. Since 2008, we have not seen any growth from our property values, our residential property values. If anything, it's been deflationary. We have seen a little bit of growth on the commercial industrial side, and the Beacon Journal did an article in terms of the premise of the article really was to show how important but complicated, but how much of a partner Akron Public Schools is in the whole economic development discussion. One, from how much property we own and footprints, but in terms of the taxpaying public's right to have a say through the Board of Education as to whether or not accepting 100% abatement. And I think, very overarching, I would make the comment that I think all of us believe that there needs to be some kind of incentive, whether it's focused or CRA or whatever. I think I'll leave that for the experts. But we have not had now 3 reappraisals with any real growth in both commercial, industrial, and residential property. So I'd sent that on to City Council, and I would show that to you in a chart, but it's not going to happen.
Well, and I wish it did, because the only other thing that I want to say is, if you go back, even on that first slide where we're talking about the capacity that we have, the enrollment that we have, but the sort of flatline funding that we get, and you look at the last several years and the people that are sitting around this board, some of whom have sort of been on the last several years, I mean, we've seen, I think, this board and this staff and this team sitting around the room around us has done an extremely good job of really focusing its efforts, because 2012 hurt. And we tried to pass a levy in 2011. It didn't pass. We tried to pass it in 2012. It succeeded, but by that time the revenue's a year off. And we were, we said at that point we were already, there was no more meat left to cut. We were cutting straight into the bone. We were cutting programs. We were cutting foreign language and sports programs and fine arts programs, and this board has been very active the last couple of years to ensure that over the last 15 years, while our enrollment had dropped 30%, our footprint had only declined by about 9%. And so this board said, well, that's not quite responsible enough, and so we need to take another look at that. And so we've been, for I would say the last several years, really focusing on being responsible in sort of narrowing that gap, and you can see it on the chart that you provided, because the time to start talking about, and even with the finance committee and the policy on the cash reserve, I know that it looks like 35 million. I agree with you. It looks like a lot of money, but when you consider that's barely 3 months of payroll, not to mention other operating expenses, I mean, it to me is a no-brainer that you have that available. And again, this board over the last couple of years has seen that because we've said at least 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of us at least were on the board when we made those cuts the last time and felt that and said, you know, we don't want to do that again.
And brought those things back as well,
And had to bring those things back and don't want
which
to.
never happens anyway.
And don't want to have to remove them again. And the time to start talking about being responsible with those finances and doing the right thing and looking at our footprint and looking at reductions in staff through attrition and making all of these decisions is not, as you said, when you're facing those cuts. It's to do them throughout time. So I just want to commend the board, the staff, everyone for taking a look at that and for working with us to be responsible and do what we told the voters we'd do in 2012. So that's the end of my soapbox. Consent agenda.
All right. Mr. President, I have before me for your consideration 1 motion and 8 resolutions on the consent agenda. These recommendations are in proper form, and I move their approval.
So moved. We have a motion and a second. Any questions on the consent agenda? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Mr. Bravo?
Yes.
Mrs. Mansfield? Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Otterman?
Yeah.
Reverend Walker?
Yes.
Ms. Walsh?
Yes.
Mr. Alexander?
Yes.
Mr. President, I have before me for your consideration 23 business affairs recommendations. At this time, however, I am pulling item 8 from consideration. It will be submitted at the next board meeting. The rest of these recommendations are in proper form, and I move their approval.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second on the business affairs recommendations. Any questions? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Mrs. Mansfield?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Otterman?
Yes.
Reverend Walker?
Yes.
Ms. Walsh?
Yes.
Mr. Alexander?
Yes.
Mr. Bravo?
Yes. Superintendent's report.
Yes. A couple of things. As Reverend Walker was talking about college and career academies, I don't have fingerprints all over, but this is our plaque of recognition from Forward Next Generation Learning. That's item number 1. The next one I wanted HR to review our athletic hiring. I know there were some questions about that process and who's involved, so I want them to give an update to board members how we accomplish that process.
Thank you. So very briefly, I just kind of wanted to cover how we do the hiring for our supplemental contracts for our sports coaching positions. And basically at the revenue generating sports, or the football and the basketball, it is a concerted effort with a lot of different moving parts. When a vacancy comes to our attention, that position is posted and we use an electronic application system. And then HR reviews the applicants that are submitted. We're looking to make sure that all of the qualifications and requirements are met. And at that point, then I bring in the central office athletic director, Mr. Vasilati, and he and I sit down and we review the applications and credentials of those under consideration. And at that point, we may weed out a few candidates based on, different things. We contact the building principal and athletic director, and then from there we generate what we consider the applicant pool. And that's where we're doing our interviews. So we do the interviews by selection committee, and we have designed several different tools that we use in the interview as far as interview guides, but we're basically looking at not only can that coach, do the defense and offense and the X's and the O's, but is that coach a good role model? Is that coach a mentor? Will that coach prepare our students for next steps, whether it's college or career. So we do an interview by committee, if you will, and then we make the selection for recommendation to Kathy McVeigh for authorization and hiring. And from there, it goes to Mr. James and then eventually to the board. Once that has been approved, either Mr. Vassalotti or I will contact that candidate and let them know that they are the preferred candidate and offer them that supplemental contract for the next school year. So that, very briefly, in a nutshell, is kind of the process that we use. So what questions?
We normally just hear around the table is a recommendation from the principal if they're going to renew or not that individual, that coach, or whatever the case might be. What you presented tonight, I didn't hear the principal in that equation set as a first step. The person saying, I'm looking at this from the building level and I'm making a recommendation. You're saying there's a committee and other people, and then it goes then back to the building principal.
I think he's trying to say, you're talking about vacancies. He's talking about existing jobs.
Existing jobs, okay.
Right, exactly. For vacancies, that's the process.
Okay.
For 1 year to the next, that is the principal.
Okay.
Sorry, I should have been that.
No, but it was me, not you.
Any other questions?
What's the answer to that?
I'm sorry,
What's the answer?
with respect to
What he
the,
just asked you.
for the recommendations, well, contracts are non-renewable in theory, they're for 1 year. So if a principal determines that they're going to, take the team in a different direction, or a lot of times, sometimes the coach will decide this is way too much work. I don't want to do this again next year. That's when the vacancy exists. So typically, yes, it is at the building level if the principal and the athletic director, in conjunction with Mr. Vassalotti, determine if they're going to take the team in a new direction.
Is that in conjunction with Mr. Vassalotti, or is that on their own? Because now half the principals don't know the football from baseball. Okay, that's just the way it is. So, I mean, are they consulting Mr. Vassalotti before in getting with him and getting his input and trying to get an understanding of why these things are happening?
In most cases, I believe, yes. That is. So Mr. Vassalotti is very engaged at the.
So they're
all
consulting
levels.
Mr. Vassalotti before they're doing any terminating of contracts?
Well, the principal is responsible for the management of the building and the staff that, is assigned to it. But yes, they are consulting with Mr. Vassalotti for.
And as I said, some of them don't know the difference between a baseball and a football. I mean, they're very good people and very good administrators, but they don't know the difference.
And just as a reminder, we do have several of our principals who play competitive sports in college, and some of them do. And Vassalotti is there as a support in case a principal needs some.
But we got a lot of principals that haven't played.
Right. But there's
College
a
or
lot
high
of
school or
our
any other.
7 high schools. I think we have 3 of them who actually did play sports in high school. I know North and Ellen's principals, in college. All right.
Any additional questions?
Just so I'm clear too, around the table too, and it's somewhat like Reverend Walker was saying that the principals are the ones who are doing it, but now I'm hearing that there's some consultation, they're getting together with Mr. Vassalotti to do these things. So there's an inconsistency there of either a principal or Mr. Vassalotti and whomever.
It's the principal's decision unless there is, an immediate concern where it's a violation of, an Ohio Athletic Association rule or something to that effect.
And let's clear it up. For vacancies, When there is a new position that has to be hired, HR has to be involved with that because there are certain trainings and requirements that they have to have. Our athletic department is involved because our Ohio High School Athletic Association rules aren't necessarily that easy to understand because there's a lot of different things around bona fide moves, the GPA requirements and eligibility. But when it comes to once that coach is in a position, from year to year, the first question that they'll ask of the principal, are you bringing everybody back? And in some cases, they won't, and they'll want to go in a different direction. And so that part of it is the principal's decision, and we have our HR department and athletic department to walk them through that process.
Any other questions? Thank you very much. I'm going to, you guys will approve on the president's report tonight, treasurer's report, we already had legal contracts and board policy.
We have for the second reading of 3 prior to approval, revised policy 8320, personnel files, revised policy 8500, food service, revised policy 8510, wellness, and that is the second reading of 3 prior to approval.
Thank you. Finance and Capital Management Committee?
No report.
And instructional policy, student issue.
Sure. A little bit about it. As you saw I know that the superintendent did pull the recommendation for the science adoption, but we want you to be able to take a look at that. So a board letter was added to SharePoint this afternoon outlining the science materials to be considered for adoption, and those will be considered at our June 12th board meeting. For science grades 4, 6, and 7, these grades will be complete with our 4 through 12 science adoption process that started in the fall of 2014. It replaces materials from 1998 and blazes a trail for digital delivery within our district. It's important to note with this adoption that a fully digital delivery of content has been recommended. Our review teams for 4th and 6th grade have recommended online textbooks with student supports for the first time ever in science. If you guys didn't get to take a look out there, Ms. Halassa was out there and she was giving quite a presentation with Ms. O'Neill, so I would recommend that you take a look. Our 7th grade review team followed the NIFSTEM middle school model of online digital textbooks and a class set for in-school reference. Surprisingly, the textbook company is offering our 7th grade class sets free of charge. Mr. Pendleton likes that part. Each grade level contract includes a 6-year site license. There's a digital display in the hallway, and in addition, each board member has the link to the presentation, so you don't have to stand out there and watch the gentleman speak. You can watch that in the comfort of your own home.
And which is good, because I came in on my lunch hour to watch them, and one is about 2.5 minutes and one's about 11 minutes. So you want to do it at home, but they're fabulous. It's just, if they had that for science when I was in school, who knows what? No, it just changes the way you look at the things and the ability to interact and work with it. They're just so the features of these new digital delivery systems include interactive and virtual labs, ebooks, brain pops, PBLs, STEM and engineering practices, and it has a strong college and career emphasis. So it really, they look fabulous. They hate me at my job now because I went back because we were talking about training for e-poll books. And I said, we ought to just do it online. We don't have time to do that, so it's not going to happen. We're just watching this. It looked amazing. But a critical aspect of this adoption includes mandatory professional development. Teachers will learn the digital instruction features of the new curriculum, embed them into Google Classrooms. And with that coming soon, we're looking at Chromebook-compatible probes for our science curriculum to support our PBL successes. So they're actually going to be able to take data, put it in, and see what happens and see how it works. A health K-12 will be a digial adoption. Social studies is looking at open source and root drawn downs to be assigned across the district. And science has moved us forward in a dramatic way. We're never going back.
One of the things too is their testing is all online. So some of the things that they showed me out there are really important when they take the tests online, being able to drag and drop pieces and being able to do those things that they later have to do in their tests. So it helps prep them for that so you're not going in cold with assumptions that you know how to do those things. Although they probably do, and we just don't, right?
And just a highlight from, on our business affairs, we did approve the addition of new tech, or continuation of new tech, and it's adding it to the middle school. So that's a nice piece to the more digital one.
Any questions for the instructional and student achievement? Any unfinished business? With that, pursuant to Ohio Revised Code Section 121.22G1, for the purposes of discussing employment and dismissal of public employees or officials of the school district, Revised Code Section 121.22G3 to consult with legal counsel regarding subjects that are the matter of pending or imminent court action, and Revised Code Section 121.22G4 to discuss negotiations or collective bargaining with employees. I request a motion for executive session.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any questions? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Mr. Otterman?
Yes.
Reverend Walker?
Yes.
Ms. Walsh?
Yes.
Mr. Alexander?
Yes.
Mr. Bravo?
Yes.
Mrs. Mansfield?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.